Hello, grade 10. Welcome back to our English class. Before we proceed to this week's episode, let us have a recap. We have learned from our past English lessons that synonym is a word or phrase that means exactly or nearly the same as another word or phrases in the same language. For example, the words begin, start, commence, and initiate are all synonyms of one another. In language, whenever we express a word in other ways, we analyze it using descriptive grammar. For week 5, quarter 4, our lesson is correct grammar in making definitions, description versus prescription. And I got this lecture from the school's division office of Pasig City. For the most essential learning competency, we are expected to observe correct grammar in making definitions. A descriptive grammar is a study of a language, its structure, and its rules as they are used in daily life by its speakers from all walks of life. Its aim is to understand language more deeply and that a single language can have multiple dialects and each dialect will have its own grammatical rules. A prescriptive grammar, on the other hand, follows a specific way how a language is used. Its main focus is the correctness of word structures and generally accepted grammar functions. Typically, the rules are handed down from generation to generation. School teachers, copy editors, and grammarians are credible and particular about prescriptive grammar. Some of the ways you can practice descriptive grammar is through the use of synonyms and context. At this point, let us have the article written by Richard Nordquist. It is entitled Descriptive Grammar. How does it compare with prescriptive grammar? The term descriptive grammar refers to an objective, non-judgmental description of the grammatical constructions in a language. It's an examination of how a language is actually being used in writing and in speech. Linguists who specialize in descriptive grammar examine the principles and patterns that underlie the use of words, phrases, clauses, and sentences. In that respect, the adjective descriptive is a bit misleading as descriptive grammar provides an analysis and explanation of a language grammar, not simply a description of it. According to Kirk Hazen, on his article to an introduction to language, descriptive grammars do not give advice. They detail the ways in which native speakers use their language. A descriptive grammar is a survey of language. For any living language, a descriptive grammar from one century will differ from a descriptive grammar of the next century because the language will have changed. According to Edwin L. Battistella, on his writing about bad language, descriptive grammar is the basis for dictionaries, which record changes in vocabulary and usage. And for the field of linguistics, which aims at describing languages and investigating the nature of language. Descriptive grammar is more a study in the why and how of language, while prescriptive grammar deals with the strict rules of right and wrong required for language to be considered grammatically correct. Prescriptive grammarians, such as most editors of nonfiction and teachers, do their darndest to enforce the rules of correct and incorrect usage. Says author Donald G. Ellis, all languages adhere to syntactical rules of one sort or another, but the rigidity of these rules is greater in some languages. It is very important to distinguish between the syntactical rules that govern a language and the rules that a culture imposes in its language. He explains that this is the distinction between descriptive and prescriptive grammar. Descriptive grammars are essentially scientific theories that attempt to explain how language works. Ellis admits that human beings were using language in a variety of forms long before there were linguists using descriptive grammar around to formulate any rules about how or why they were speaking as they did. On the other hand, he likens prescriptive grammarians to the stereotypical uptight high school English teachers who prescribe, like medicine for what ails you, how you ought to speak. To illustrate the difference between descriptive and prescriptive grammar, let's look at this sentence. I ain't going nowhere. Now, to a descriptive grammarian, there is nothing wrong with the sentence because it's being spoken by someone who is using the language to construct a phrase that has meaning for someone else who speaks the same language. To a prescriptive grammarian, however, that sentence is a virtual house of horrors. First, it contains the word ain't, which, strictly speaking, and we must be strict if we're prescriptive, is slang. So, although you'll find ain't in the dictionary, as the adage says, ain't a word, the sentence also contains a double negative, ain't and nowhere, which just compounds the atrocity. Simply having the word ain't in the dictionary is a further illustration of the difference between the two types of grammar. Descriptive grammar notes the words used in the language, pronunciation, meaning, and even etymology without judgment. But in prescriptive grammar, the use of ain't is just plain wrong, especially in formal speaking or writing. Would a descriptive grammarian ever say something was ungrammatical? Yes. If someone utters a sentence using words or phrases or construction that as a native speaker, they would never even think of putting together. For instance, a native English speaker wouldn't start a sentence with two query words, as in, who, where are you going? Because the result would be unintelligible as well as ungrammatical. It's one case in which the descriptive and prescriptive grammarians would actually agree. Now that the difference between descriptive and prescriptive grammar is very clear to all of us, we are now ready to accomplish the written tasks. You have to answer learning task 1 to 3 and quiz number 5. For your performance task, you have to explain what Barack Obama has quoted. It's important to make sure that we're talking with each other in a way that heals, not in a way that wounds. That's all for this week's episode. This is Mom Fanny Luna signing off. Happy learning. Keep safe, everyone.